Hey folks, Quill18 here, and as I alluded to in my channel, I'm totally sick of playing video games and making video game videos. I want to start on my real passion, which is cooking, and making this channel into a cooking channel. So we're going to start that today. We're going to start with a very important skill that everyone should have, but especially, if you're a young dude, this is a skill that will bring you through life. This will impress your bosses and get you chicks. You need to know how to cook a proper steak, and it's the easiest thing in the world to do. First thing, you want to choose a good steak. If you're going to make steak, there's no reason to get a crappy piece of meat. It's better off to eat it half as often than to eat something that's bad. So I've selected here as a ribeye steak. Very, very nice. Good combination of flavor and texture and sort of tenderness, and just all kinds of delicious. This is my favorite kind of cut. This cut I have here is not especially thick. It's maybe 1 to 1.5 centimeters, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch, somewhere in there. If you go for a thicker steak, you won't overcook it as easily, and it'll stay more juicy. So a thinner steak, you really got to stay on top of it. You also want to make sure it's at room temperature. So take it out at least a half hour ahead of time when you're going to be cooking. Very, very key. You also want to season these steaks. A good steak doesn't need much. You don't want to be eating this with ketchup or barbecue sauce or anything like that, but you still need to season it. And the way you do that is you apply a good amount of salt and some pepper to both sides. And I'm using kosher salt. It's very nice. It's a little chunkier. It's easier to apply sort of by hand and get some control over it. It also sticks to the steak very nicely. Makes a nice crust, so that's what I like to use. And yeah, a good amount of pepper, and you want to put that on both sides. You also want to oil your steak a little bit. Now you can apply the oil to the pan, but I actually like to do it to the steak ahead of time instead of in the pan, just so that way I can get sort of a nice total coverage. We're going to be cooking the steak at a fairly high temperature, so you don't want to use something like butter or olive oil, because those burn or start to smoke at a very low temperature and go very, very bad. So you want to use something with a higher smoke point, and I'm using canola here, although there are even other oils that might be even better. Then you are going to want to make sure that your cast iron pan is as hot as possible. Put it on maximum, let it get hot. It might start to smoke a little bit. That's when you're getting to the right point. I think I drizzled in a little bit of some canola I had left over from sitting in my plate for my steak, and indeed, that starts to smoke as well. That's, you're hot there, and even going with a canola, it is going to smoke, in fact, a fair amount. So make sure to open a window in your kitchen. It'll help. So you put your steak in there, and again, for my steak, which is maybe, it's 1 to 1.5 centimeters thick, I'm cooking it for 1.5 minutes per side, and that's it. In the hottest possible pan, that much. And what it's going to do is going to do two things. One, the fact that it's so hot means I'm going to get a nice crust on both sides of it. You're going to get those sort of chemical breakdowns of the structure of the meat that's going to make this nice browning effect. And you're going to get that on both sides from this high temperature. And one of the reasons we use cast iron is because it holds heat very, very, very well. So you're going to be able to do that. Whereas if you just used an aluminum pan, it would quickly lose its heat. You wouldn't get the nice crust. Don't believe anyone who tells you that this crust seals in the juices. That's not true. There's no reason you should think that what you're doing here is creating a waterproof steak. It just doesn't happen. But it does give it an extremely, extremely good flavor. So 1.5 minutes per side, and then that's it. And then you take it off. Our goal here, and you can kind of squeeze it with your finger, and you can actually get a sense of how done it is. And that's something you're going to get with the sort of experience. But we're going for medium rare here, because you don't want to overcook a good steak. You just lose it. If you like your steak well done, you probably shouldn't be eating steak. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, so once it's done, you take it off, and this is very important. You need to let it rest for at least 3 minutes. Just cover it with some foil so it doesn't get too cold, and let it sit there. It's very important. If you cut into the steak right away, you're going to get juice just leak out all over your plate, and you're going to be left with a terrible, nasty, tough piece of meat sitting in a pool of juice. But if you let it sit for 3 minutes, it'll absorb the liquid back into its structure, and then you're going to get a tender, juicy steak. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So I like to slice it sort of on an angle. Just helps to sort of break up the grain a little bit, makes everything taste a little bit more tender, and you can see how pinky it's going to be there, and it's just excellent. And then it's time to eat it. And what are you going to eat steak with? Well, I'm a fan of that great, famous French vegetable. Of course, I'm talking about Brussels sprouts. In this case, I have made a pan-fried Brussels sprouts with some small chunks of bacon in a cream and sherry reduction sauce, which is just to die for. And maybe we'll do the recipe next time. No more video games though, because video games are for losers. Cooking is for awesome people. See you next time, folks.